Hey, good evening. This is Dr. Anju Singh, doing a voiceover just because it's going to be more convenient than typing, something I learned at Kuplu Academy. I just wanted to give a feedback on the TEDx talks that I just watched about increasing your radius. I think that's absolutely amazing. My feedback on that would be, the first point that he made, take inventory of your own bias. I personally would preface that by first stating to accept and acknowledge that we all have bias. That's one of the issues I'm noticing is happening very often, that a lot of people are struggling with acknowledging that they have bias. A lot of people believe that they don't have bias, and they are coming from a very genuine and honest place that they believe they do not have bias. So I think that's the very first thing that we all need to do is acknowledge that we all have bias. Some of our biases we may be aware of, and some of our biases we may not be aware of. The term that I like to use when I have this conversation anywhere is the one way to go exploring our bias. I call it, I use the metaphor of going splunking in the caverns of our soul, because that's where our biases are hiding, in those deep, dark crevices. Because over our life experiences, we have learned to rationalize and justify our biases under other experiences. So that's the first thing I'd like to say, is because until and unless we don't truly acknowledge and accept that we all have biases, I don't think we can truly begin the process of even taking an honest and true inventory of our bias. Um, so that's my first thing. And I really like the other points of saying that we need to evaluate our sources. I come from the field of science, and that's one of the things we talk about, is we have to always evaluate the credibility of our sources and look for bias in our sources. And there's always bias in our sources. Even the best of best sciences have their limitations, their strengths, their weaknesses. And it's always good to be mindful of them, have an eye out. What are the limitations? Where are the boundaries? Because whatever the conclusions of that study, that scientific study may be, those conclusions apply only under certain circumstances. They may not apply when the circumstances change. We talk about dependent variable, independent variable and stuff. So when you change the variables, the conclusions, the ultimate hypothesis may or may not stand as those variables change. And then yes, about speaking out. And I think few things I would like to add about speaking out is, number one, always speak out in a professional, respectful manner. Avoid using derogatory terms, no matter how tempting that may be. And I personally, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment, but I personally like to, or try to, speak out to people who I know are of an opposing view, because I personally find that very educational. I've always used the word educational. I've always used the word enlightening. I've always used the word, it expands my horizons, but I guess I can add to my lexicon that it increases my radius. So I really like to speak to people who come from a different place, who come from a different perspective, who think differently than me, and who, quote unquote, oppose whatever it is that I am proposing, because it's in that kind of a debate that our minds really grow. Because especially recently, we've seen happen around us in our communities, that people tend to surround themselves with like-minded people. And unfortunately, what happens with that, one of the downfalls of that, is that we find ourselves in an echo voice where our own uh, opinions and biases get amplified. And that then falls into that trap of confirmation bias. So the only the twist I would put on that speaking out part is speaking out, especially um, to people who may oppose, because that then is good grounds for education, enlightenment, and expanding of our horizons. Um, and I'll be happy to share more of how I learned to do this through some of my own personal experiences, because and all of these come from almost 10 years ago. But anyway, this was very informative, and thank you.